Her queen hovered mid-air, but the janitor's calm voice cut through her certainty. Checkmate in 2. Charlotte's breath caught. Had she finally met the one man who could destroy her game and undo her heart? Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe, tap like and share this video. The more voices we reach, the louder these stories become. Charlotte Whitmore's laughter echoed through the glass-walled conference room, sharp and polished like the stilettos she wore. The mahogany chessboard between her and the trust fund banker gleamed under the chandelier, each piece in its place, poised for battle. Charlotte leaned forward, the neckline of her fitted scarlet dress daring her thick, curvy figure framed by the tailored fabric that announced power with every breath she took. She flicked her queen forward, trapping his rook and cutting off escape. "Checkmate," she said coolly, her green eyes flashing. The banker gaped at the board, his Harvard ring catching the light as he reached for his fallen rook. "Wait, that's not possible." "It is," Charlotte replied, already pushing her chair back. "And it tells me everything I need to know. You think shortcuts win games. They don't." She stood, hips swaying, and extended a manicured hand toward the door. Her assistant ushered the red-faced suitor out, another one eliminated, another waste of her time. For 3 years, this had been her ritual. Any man bold enough to seek her hand had to prove himself on the chessboard. She'd never been beaten. At 31, the CEO of Whitmore Technologies, an empire of artificial intelligence and digital infrastructure, had carved her legacy in steel and glass. Men wanted her money, her name, her curves, but not her mind. Chess was her filter. And every suitor had failed. Charlotte's heels clicked as she returned to the board, sliding each antique piece into its velvet-lined case. Her grandfather had taught her chess before he taught her arithmetic. He used to say, "Show me how a man plays the game, and I'll show you his character." "Evening, Miss Whitmore," came a quiet voice. Charlotte turned. A tall black man in a dark custodial uniform stood by the doorway, a mop leaning against the wall beside his cleaning cart. His shoulders were broad, his movements deliberate, and his eyes lingered on the chessboard with a focus she wasn't used to seeing from men who worked in her tower. "You're late," she said automatically, though she knew his schedule wasn't her business. He didn't flinch. "I was waiting for your match to finish, didn't want to interrupt." Something in his tone, measured, unbothered, respectful but steady, made her pause. "And you watched?" "A little," he admitted. "Your pawn sacrifice in the middle game, that was brilliant. Most players would have clung to the material. You didn't. You saw the bigger picture." Charlotte's brows arched. No suitor, no board member, no smug hedge fund heir had ever praised her game with such precision. She crossed her arms. "You play?" The man gave a small smile. "Enough to know you had him beat 10 moves before he realized it." Her competitive spark ignited. She studied him more carefully now. Strong jaw, calloused hands, a face hardened by work but softened by dignity. A janitor, yes, but not the kind who looked down when he spoke. He held her gaze with steady patience. "Sit," she ordered, sweeping the pieces back into starting position. "Prove it." He hesitated, glancing at the mop, the cart, the polished floors waiting for him. "I'm on the clock." "I sign the checks," she said, smirking. "Your supervisor answers to me. For now, I'm telling you to play." The man pulled out a chair across from her. "Darius Cole," he said simply, extending his hand. "Charlotte Whitmore," she replied, shaking it. His grip was firm, respectful, no hesitation. Darius moved first. A simple pawn to e4. Clean. Confident. She countered with her knight, already calculating. He didn't play fast or nervous, but with the calm rhythm of someone who'd thought through positions hundreds of times. 5 minutes in, Charlotte felt her pulse pick up. His moves weren't flashy, but each one tightened around her like a net. By move 8, her queen was cornered. By move 12, her king's defences crumbled. "Check," Darius murmured, sliding his bishop with the grace of inevitability. Charlotte's jaw tightened. She scanned the board, searching for escape. None. He leaned back, hands folded loosely in his lap. And mate in 2. Her chair scraped the marble floor as she stood abruptly, chest rising and falling beneath the scarlet fabric. "That's impossible." "Not impossible," Darius said softly. "Just unexpected." Charlotte gripped the edge of the table. No one had beaten her in 15 years. Not a suitor, not a board member, not even the grandmasters she'd paid to spar with for fun. And now, in fewer than 20 moves, this janitor, This man who mopped her floors had dismantled her game like it was nothing. She should have been furious. Instead, an unfamiliar heat spread across her chest. It wasn't humiliation. It was hunger. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she demanded. "Parks, community college, anywhere I could find a board." He shrugged. "I didn't grow up with much. Chess was the one thing no one could take away from me." Charlotte studied him in silence. Her mind told her this was ridiculous. He wasn't her equal, not by money, not by status, but her body betrayed her. She felt the pull of a challenge she hadn't known she craved. Her lips curved into a slow, dangerous smile. "Beat me in chess and I'll marry you," she said suddenly, her voice like velvet edged with steel. Darius chuckled, shaking his head. "That's not a fair prize for me." "It's not a joke," she pressed. "No one's ever beaten me before. You have. That makes you different." He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking with hers, unshaken by her power, her wealth, or the daring neckline of her dress. "Different doesn't always mean compatible." Charlotte's smirk deepened. "Play me again. One more game. I want to know if it was luck or if I finally met someone who can match me." Darius reached for a pawn. "Then be ready, Miss Whitmore, because I don't play for luck. I play to win." And as the pieces clicked into motion under the golden chandelier, Charlotte realized with a thrill she hadn't felt in years that she might finally have found someone who could change the rules of the game entirely. Charlotte Whitmore's world had always been defined by control. Control over her company, her image, her wealth, even her lovers. She had built her empire on calculated decisions, never stepping into a move without knowing 6 counters ahead. But sitting across from Darius Cole in that conference room, watching the confidence in his eyes as he dismantled her strategies, she felt the ground shift beneath her carefully constructed reality. They reset the board, the smooth weight of the antique pieces grounding her trembling fingers. For the first time since her grandfather's death, Charlotte felt nervous before a chess match. Nervous and alive. "Your opening was sloppy," Darius said matter-of-factly, setting up his pawns. "No one's ever told me that," she shot back. "They were probably too scared of you." He met her eyes briefly before looking back at the board. "Fear clouds honesty. Chess doesn't lie." Charlotte bristled, then surprised herself by laughing softly. Her laugh usually cut like glass, designed to intimidate, but this time it rang with genuine amusement. She pushed a pawn forward, a deliberate statement. She wasn't backing down. For the next half hour, the conference room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the occasional scrape of wood against wood. Charlotte's mind whirred with calculations, but Darius had a way of slowing the pace, grounding the game. He didn't rush, didn't flinch, didn't play to impress. He simply played. At move 20, Charlotte realized she was losing again. He wasn't just strong, he was precise. He'd grown up learning to survive through this game. Every move he made carried the weight of someone who had lost too much to play casually. "How long have you been working here?" she asked suddenly, needing to break the spell of silence. 3 years. He slid his rook into position, a quiet threat. "And before that?" Darius shrugged, eyes still fixed on the board. "A mix of things. Community college, part-time jobs, hustling chess in the park when rent was late." Charlotte tilted her head, intrigued. "Chess hustling? You'd be surprised how many lawyers, professors, and so-called prodigies have lost their lunch money in Washington Square. You learn fast when your dinner depends on a 64-square board." Her lips curved. "And what did you learn?" "That patience wins, and that arrogance is a weakness." His gaze flicked to her face. The implication was unmistakable. Charlotte inhaled sharply. No man dared speak to her like that. Yet instead of anger, she felt a heat crawl up her throat. She wanted to slam the board, demand respect, but a more dangerous impulse took root. She wanted to hear him say more. "So, what's a man with your mind doing mopping floors in my building?" Darius moved his queen, pinning her knight. "Because bills don't pay themselves, and because I'm building something." Slowly. "Building what?" "A company. Hartwell Services. Cleaning maintenance, but with fair wages, healthcare, and growth opportunities. I'm tired of watching people get treated like disposable machines. My idea is to prove you can treat workers with dignity and still make a profit." Charlotte froze mid-move, her manicured fingers hovering over a pawn. That was more vision than half her board of directors had shown in years. She searched his face, looking for bravado, but found only calm conviction. "And where do you plan to get funding for this utopia of yours?" she challenged. His bishop slid forward, clean and efficient. "One step at a time. I'll finish my degree, save what I can, maybe pitch when the timing's right." "You sound like a man with an MBA, she muttered. "Not yet," he said evenly, "but I will. Debt-free, even if it takes longer. I'm not selling my future to loan sharks for a fast track." Charlotte leaned back in her chair, her dress hugging every curve, but for once she wasn't thinking about how she looked. She was thinking about him. This janitor, this man who had beaten her at her own game, was speaking with more integrity than the senators, bankers, and heirs she'd rejected. "Check," he murmured. Her eyes darted to the board. He had her trapped again, a quiet sequence of moves she hadn't anticipated. She tried to fight, but within 5 turns she was cornered, her king smothered. "Impossible," she whispered, staring at the board. "Not impossible," Darius replied, "just unfamiliar." Charlotte's pulse thundered in her ears. She had been bested twice, not by chance, not by a fluke, but by a man who played with clarity, patience, and courage. She stood abruptly, crossing the room to the window. The city lights glittered below, a kingdom she commanded. Yet for the first time she felt like the pawn in someone else's game. "You're dangerous," she said, her voice low. Darius chuckled. "I just play chess." "No," she turned, her auburn blonde hair spilling across her shoulders. "You play life differently. You're not afraid of me. Do you know how rare that is?" He shrugged again, but there was no arrogance in it. "Respect doesn't mean fear, and fear doesn't mean respect." Charlotte stared at him, her body taut with contradictions. This was madness. He was a janitor. She was a CEO. Their worlds didn't overlap, and yet she wanted to close the distance between them, to test if the steadiness in his gaze could undo her the way his chess moves had. She walked back to the table, her heels striking the marble like the beat of war drums. "Play me again," she ordered. "You'll lose again. Then I'll learn again." She smirked, lowering herself into the chair. "But let's raise the stakes." His brow furrowed. "What kind of stakes?" Her eyes locked on his, gleaming with challenge. "Beat me in chess, and I'll marry you." The room fell silent. Even the hum of the AC seemed to fade. Darius blinked once, slowly, then leaned back, studying her as though she were a puzzle worth solving. "That's not a prize I'm asking for." "It's not about what you're asking for," she said, her voice velvet over steel. "It's about what I'm offering. You've done what no man has done in 15 years. You beat me. Twice. That makes you different." For a long moment he said nothing. Then his lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're serious. Deadly." Darius reached for a pawn, his fingers steady, his expression unreadable. "Then let's see if you're ready to lose everything you think you control." Charlotte's breath caught, but her hands trembled with excitement as she reset the board. The chandelier light glowed on their faces as the first move clicked into place. Somewhere between the queen and king, between strategy and surrender, she realized she was playing a far more dangerous game than she'd ever dared before. The following evening, Charlotte lingered in her office long after the last executive had left. Reports lay untouched across her desk, emails unanswered, contracts unsigned. None of it mattered, not compared to the way Darius Cole's calm voice still echoed in her mind. "Beat me in chess, and I'll marry you." She hadn't meant to say it. The words had slipped out, born from adrenaline and defiance, a reckless impulse she couldn't take back. Yet when she replayed the moment, her pulse quickened. For once she hadn't been the untouchable CEO or the icy queen of the boardroom. She had been a woman, challenged and thrilled by a man who saw her not as a prize, but as an opponent worthy of respect. The elevator chimed. She knew it was him before he entered. The soft squeak of polished shoes, the faint scent of cleaning solution, the steady cadence of a man who carried dignity even in silence. "Back again?" Darius asked, pushing his cart inside. Charlotte closed the lid of her laptop. "I was hoping you'd show up." He glanced at her, expression calm as ever, but she noticed the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Another game?" Her lips curved. "Always." They set up the pieces. Charlotte leaned forward, her curves pressing against the edge of the table, her eyes sharp with focus. Darius didn't react, not outwardly, but she noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw. He wasn't immune to her presence. For the first 10 moves, they traded evenly. Charlotte was sharper tonight, her lines cleaner, her traps more deliberate. Yet still, Darius anticipated her counters. When he advanced his knight with quiet precision, her heart skipped. He was building something she couldn't see yet, and the uncertainty thrilled her. "Why do you keep playing with me?" she asked suddenly. His rook slid into place. "Because you keep asking." "That's not an answer." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "Maybe because it's the only time you're not performing." Her breath caught. She'd spent years wrapped in armor, sharp heels, sharper words, curves wielded like weapons. But he had stripped it away in seconds, naming the one truth no one else dared to see. "Careful," she murmured. "I might think you're flirting." Darius smirked faintly. Would that be so bad? The silence that followed was electric. Charlotte pushed her queen forward, forcing him into defense. Yet even as she played, her mind churned. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to feel her pulse race at the sight of a janitor across the table. She wasn't supposed to wonder what his hands would feel like brushing hers as he moved a piece. She wasn't supposed to want. And yet she did. The game stretched past midnight, each move winding tighter, each silence heavier. When at last he declared checkmate, Charlotte leaned back in her chair, her chest rising and falling. "You enjoy humiliating me, don't you?" she whispered. Darius shook his head. "It's not about humiliation. It's about truth. Chess shows who we are when the pieces fall. You want to dominate. I want to endure. That's why I win." Charlotte felt heat spread through her, equal parts frustration and fascination. No man had ever spoken to her like this. No man had dared to challenge not just her game, but her essence. "You're dangerous," she said again, "only if you're afraid of the truth." By the end of the week, word had spread. Her assistant, Miranda, raised an eyebrow as she delivered the morning reports. "People are talking, Charlotte, about your late-night chess partner." Charlotte sipped her espresso, feigning disinterest. "Let them talk. It's not just idle gossip. The board is concerned. Investors, too." Miranda hesitated. "They don't understand why you're entertaining someone so far beneath your station." Charlotte slammed the porcelain cup onto its saucer, the sharp crack echoing through the office. "Beneath my station, he's beaten me more times than every banker and senator's son combined. He sees the board clearer than half this city's so-called geniuses. Don't call him beneath anything." Miranda flinched but said nothing more. Still, the damage was done. By lunch, Charlotte received a discreet message from her Aunt Eleanor, who held controlling shares of the company. "Dinner tonight. We need to discuss your recent distractions." Distractions. That's what they all thought. That a man like Darius could only ever be a diversion, a scandal to sweep under the rug. None of them saw what she saw. The integrity in his eyes, the clarity in his moves, the vision he carried like an unlit torch. But others did notice. That evening, as Darius collected his supplies, his supervisor Tony pulled him aside. "Man, you need to be careful. Word is getting around." Darius frowned. "About what?" "About you and the boss lady. Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but people in power don't mix with us. Not for real. When they're done, they drop you, and you're the one left, picking up the pieces." Darius tightened his grip on the mop handle. "It's not like that." Tony gave him a pitying look. "I've been here 20 years. Trust me, it's always like that." By the time Charlotte and Darius sat down for their next game, the weight of whispers hung heavy in the air. She moved her pieces with a little too much force. He played slower, his eyes distant. "You're distracted," she said. "So are you," he replied. Charlotte sighed, leaning back, her curves spilling against the leather chair. "They're talking. The board. My family. They want me to end this." Darius's jaw tightened. "Then maybe you should." The words sliced through her, sharper than any queen's gambit. She stared at him, fury and fear tangled in her chest. "Is that what you want?" His eyes softened, but he didn't look away. "I want what's real, but I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built. If this costs you your company, your name, your future, then it isn't worth it." Charlotte's lips trembled, though she tried to steady them into a smirk. "You think I care what they say?" "Yes," Darius said simply, "because power has always been your armor. Without it, you're vulnerable, and I won't be the man who strips you of it." Her hand hovered over the board, but she couldn't move. For the first time, she didn't know the right play. The silence stretched, thick and aching. Finally, Darius stood. Finish the game without me tonight. Charlotte's throat closed as she watched him walk away, his broad shoulders fading into the shadow of the empty corridor. For years she had destroyed men across this table, sending them out humiliated and broken. But this was different. This time, it wasn't her opponent who had been defeated. It was her. Charlotte Whitmore had never begged for anything in her life. She had demanded, commanded, manipulated, but never begged. And yet, for the first time, she felt the crushing weight of desperation as she sat in the mahogany-panelled boardroom, staring down the sharp eyes of her family and investors. Her Aunt Eleanor sat at the head of the table, pearls gleaming against her pale throat. "Charlotte, this has gone far enough. Your fraternizing with the janitor has become a liability. Investors are whispering. Clients are questioning. End it, or we will call a vote of no confidence." The words hit like a slap. Charlotte clenched her fists beneath the table, her thick curves wrapped in a black sheath dress that suddenly felt like armor about to crack. "My personal life has no bearing on Whitmore Technologies' performance," she said coolly. "We've doubled our market share in 2 years, tripled our AI contracts. Numbers don't lie." "Numbers don't protect reputation," Eleanor snapped. "This family built an empire on appearances. You will not destroy it with your reckless indulgence." The other board members murmured their agreement, a chorus of disapproval closing around her. Charlotte lifted her chin, refusing to let them see the storm inside. "I don't answer to gossip." "You answer to us," her Uncle Harrison growled, "and we say this ends now. Fire him, make a public statement, prove you're not compromised." The meeting adjourned with no resolution, but the ultimatum rang in her ears long after the room emptied. End it, or lose everything. Meanwhile, Darius Cole faced his own trial. He was wiping down marble floors when 2 security officers approached, their expressions cold. "Mr. Cole, you've been reported for conduct incompatible with professional standards." He straightened, frowning. "What conduct? I've never missed a shift. My work is spotless." "You've been using company facilities for personal activities with management," one officer said stiffly. "That violates policy. Your employment is terminated effective immediately." Darius's chest tightened. "I played chess during my break. That's all." "Doesn't matter," the officer replied. "Pack your things. Your final check will be mailed." The humiliation burned, but beneath it was anger. Anger that the truth didn't matter, that the whispers had already written his fate. He gathered his few belongings, an old paperback, a notebook filled with financial projections for Hartwell Services, the pen Charlotte had once borrowed and forgotten to return, and left the tower without looking back. That night, Charlotte's phone rang. She answered on the first ring. "They fired me," Darius said simply. Her heart plummeted. "What? No. I'll override it. I'll reinstate you." "You can't." "Of course I can. I'm the CEO." "And what will it cost you?" His voice was calm, but the undercurrent of pain was unmistakable. "They're waiting for you to make that move so they can strip you of your position. Do it, and you lose everything you've built." Charlotte pressed the phone to her ear, her breath shaking. "Darius, I don't care about the company. I care about you." Silence crackled between them. Finally, he said, "I care about you too, but I won't let you sacrifice your future for me. That's not love. That's ruin." Her chest ached as if someone had driven a rook straight through her heart. "So what do we do?" she whispered. "We decide if what we have is strong enough to survive without the company's approval. If it's real, we don't need their permission." The line went quiet. She closed her eyes, fighting tears. For once, she didn't have the answer. Days bled into nights. Charlotte moved through her empire like a ghost, her stilettos echoing across sterile halls. Every report, every shareholder call, every press briefing felt meaningless. She had built her identity on dominance, but without Darius's steady gaze across the chessboard, it all felt hollow. When Eleanor scheduled an emergency board meeting, Charlotte knew the moment had come. The conference room was packed with family, investors, and executives. All eyes turned to her as Eleanor spoke. "Charlotte, this is your final chance. End your involvement with Mr. Cole, or step down." Charlotte rose slowly, the scarlet dress she wore tonight a deliberate act of defiance. Her curves drew every eye, but it was the fire in her green gaze that silenced the room. "I will not be told who I can and cannot spend time with," she declared. Darius Cole is one of the most intelligent, principled men I've ever met. If this board would rather oust me than respect my right to choose my own company, then go ahead. But understand this, you'll be discarding the leader who turned this empire into what it is today." A ripple of shock swept through the room. Eleanor's lips thinned. "You're being foolish." "No," Charlotte said firmly. "I'm being honest. For once in my life, I've found someone who challenges me, who sees me as an equal, not a trophy. If that threatens you more than market volatility or technological disruption, then maybe I'm not the one unfit to lead." For a moment, silence reigned. Then one of the younger board members cleared his throat. "She's right. Our value has soared under her leadership. Removing her over this would destabilize the company." Another investor chimed in. "Her values are part of our brand now. Integrity, innovation, equality. If she stands by this man, it only reinforces that image." Eleanor's face darkened, but she was outnumbered. The vote of no confidence never came. Charlotte left the room victorious, but shaken. She had defended her position, but at what cost to Darius? That same evening, she found him at a corner table in a quiet cafe, hunched over his notebook. His strong hands were stained with ink, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Darius," she said softly. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Charlotte, what are you doing here?" "I stood up for us," she said. "The board tried to force me to end it. I refused." His eyes widened. And I'm still CEO." She smiled faintly. "Some of them even supported me because of it." Darius exhaled slowly, relief softening his features. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she said firmly, sliding into the seat across from him. "I've lived my life by their rules. For once, I'm choosing my own." He studied her for a long moment. "And what happens now?" Charlotte reached across the table, placing her manicured hand over his ink-stained one. "Now, we build. Together. Whatever they think, whatever they say, we'll play our own game." For the first time in weeks, he smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that lit up his whole face. "Then let's make it a winning one." And in that dim cafe, with no chandelier and no polished marble floors, Charlotte felt freer than she ever had in her glittering tower. She wasn't just a CEO. She was a woman who had chosen her equal, no matter the cost. 2 years later, the conference room looked different. The same mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, the antique chess set polished and waiting. But the energy had changed. This was no longer the chamber where Charlotte Whitmore annihilated suitors for sport. It was now the room where she and Darius Cole planned their future, on the board, in business, and in life. Charlotte sat at the head of the table, her curvy frame draped in an emerald silk blouse that hugged her body with unapologetic elegance. She had grown softer and fiercer at the same time, still commanding, still brilliant, but warmer, freer. Her green eyes carried laughter now, not just calculation. Darius entered in a tailored suit, a leather folio tucked under his arm. He looked every bit the CEO himself, the kind of man who belonged in this tower not as an employee but as a partner. His company, Hartwell Professional Services, had grown from a fragile dream into a flourishing enterprise. 50 employees, contracts with major corporations, a reputation for treating workers with dignity and still posting record profits. He set the folio on the table, then leaned down to kiss Charlotte gently on the lips. "Quarterly numbers," he said with a grin. "And a game, if you're brave enough." Charlotte smirked, arranging the pawns with deliberate care. "I've never stopped being brave, but I admit, playing you still makes me sweat." They sat, the pieces clicking into place. Outside, the skyline of the city glittered, but inside the room, it was only them, the Queen and her challenger, equals across the board. As they played, Charlotte listened to Darius present his company's growth figures. Revenue is up 30%. Employee retention is at 93%. Clients are starting to pitch us instead of the other way around. Charlotte nodded, though her eyes tracked the board. "That's because you built something rare, ethics and profit side by side. Everyone told you it couldn't be done. You proved them wrong." "And you?" he countered. "Cross Industries is still dominating AI infrastructure, and you did it while standing up to your board, investors, and half your family. You're more than a CEO now, Charlotte. You're a symbol." She flushed, though she hid it behind a calculated rook advance. "Don't flatter me. You'll distract me into losing." "Maybe that's the plan," he teased. She arched an eyebrow. You've already beaten me more times than I'll admit out loud." They fell into silence then, the quiet intensity of chess filling the air. But the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was comfortable, woven with unspoken trust. At move 15, Darius leaned back. "Remember the first time we played?" Charlotte laughed softly. "How could I forget? I thought you were just a janitor." "I was." "No," she corrected, sliding her queen forward. "You were always more. I was just too blind to see it." Their eyes locked, and for a moment the board blurred. Charlotte remembered the fire of that first match, the shock of defeat, the terrifying thrill of attraction. She had gambled everything to keep him in her life, and she had won more than she'd ever dreamed. But not everyone had welcomed their union. When they'd announced their engagement, Charlotte's aunt Eleanor had cut her from the family estate. Investors had threatened to withdraw. The tabloids had mocked her, the Queen and her janitor. Charlotte had endured it all, because every time she came home to Darius's steady arms, she knew she'd made the right move. And now the same investors who once sneered begged for meetings with him, eager to understand his revolutionary business model. The same family members who had scorned her whispered apologies, hoping to stay in her good graces. It had taken 2 years, but they had proven themselves, together. "Check," Darius murmured, breaking her reverie. Charlotte frowned at the board. His knight had slipped into position quietly, threatening her king. She countered with her bishop, determined to hold her ground. "You're relentless," she muttered. "So are you," he said. "That's why this works." After the game ended, Darius victorious by a slim margin, they lingered at the board, fingers brushing over the carved pieces. "You know," Charlotte said softly, "this set used to remind me of loneliness, of all the men who sat across from me and never really saw me. But now, every time I look at it, I think of us." Darius's hand covered hers. "I think of us too. 2 people from different worlds, building one world together." Her throat tightened. She wasn't the kind of woman who cried, but tonight she nearly did. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "The risks? The backlash?" He shook his head firmly. "Not once. Everything I have now, my company, my growth, my happiness, I built it beside you. I wouldn't trade that for anyone's approval." Charlotte's lips trembled into a smile. "Good, because I still mean what I said that first night." "What's that?" She leaned in, her eyes burning with the same reckless fire that had sparked their beginning. "Beat me in chess, and I'll marry you." Darius chuckled. "We're already married, Charlotte." "Then keep beating me," she whispered, "so I never forget why I said yes." He kissed her then, slow and sure, sealing the vow with something stronger than words. Later that evening, after their strategy meeting turned into laughter and whispered promises, Charlotte curled up against Darius on the leather sofa by the window. The city sprawled beneath them, but it no longer felt like hers alone. "You know," she murmured, tracing a finger along his jawline, "for all my planning, all my strategies, the best move I ever made wasn't on a chessboard." "Oh," he asked, amused, "and what was that?" "Letting you win." Darius laughed, his chest rumbling against her cheek. "You didn't let me win. I earned it." She smiled, eyes closing. "Exactly. And in that quiet, with the city lights shimmering like captured stars and the antique chess set resting between them, Charlotte realized she had finally mastered the game her grandfather had never taught her. The game of love, respect, and partnership. Because the greatest victories weren't about domination. They were about finding someone who could meet you as an equal, challenge you without fear, and stand beside you when the world turned against you. Together, she and Darius had turned scandal into strength, defeat into triumph, and a reckless bet into a life worth every sacrifice. And so they lived, strategically, passionately, and fearlessly, proving that sometimes the most important checkmate is the one that frees your heart.